Hi everyone, this is Ingrid and welcome to my WinterBookLand. And today we are taking a look at a well-known classic that I recently read, and that is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. Okay, so before we go into anything more, I just want to say that this video is dedicated to my good friend Nadia, who is currently studying in England. We love you, Nadia. Originally, I had planned to drink a little bit of wine during this review just to set the mood, but it's so goddamn cold right now that I can't be bothered to drink anything else than tea. Oh, that's hot. So I feel like Dorian Gray is kind of the book that, and I'm gonna call it Dorian Gray because I can't be bothered to say the entire name, but I feel like it's the kind of classic that, you know the basic idea of it, you just don't know like the deeper parts of the story. So you can ask yourself like, what is The Picture of Dorian Gray all about? Well, it's about a boy named Dorian Gray, and he has a friend who's drawn this beautiful picture of him. And Dorian, as a joke, says that he wishes that the picture would age instead of him, because he wants to remain beautiful forever. The thing that happens is that his wish comes true, but not only in his age, but also all the sins he commits during his life. As you can imagine, this starts to chip away at Dorian's morality and his personality and overall his goodness. Now, the first thing I want to say about this book is that I feel like it should be required reading, because this book is such a good exploration of the human mind and society, as is normal for books from this age, but it's a really good book to get into classics as well, because I feel like this is a very good blend. Oscar Wilde has a language that is very easy to read, so if you're hesitant about going into classics, I feel like The Picture of Dorian Gray is a good starting point. Slight warning here, of course. We should know about the historical context, but like that still can't excuse some of the casual racism that is in this book. Just be aware of that when you're reading it. I just mentioned historical context, and that is very important in regards to a lot of the things that happens in this book and a lot of the things that are commented on. I saw a lot of, low reviews of this book where they just didn't understand why the characters sat around talking so much about this and this and that. But what you should know is that this book was writing just when naturalism was starting to blossom. And the thing about this is that naturalism was a response to realism, which was what Oscar Wilde mainly wrote in, I think. So that is a very major factor of this book. His preface, which I'm going to talk about later, is mainly about this. So that's what you need to know going into the book. You also need to know that this book was censored. Lucky me, I read the introduction, which is last in the book in this edition, before I started reading it, because I knew I wanted to annotate and I didn't have the proper tools to annotate at that time. So I just read the introduction, and the thing is, in the book description it says like it's a story of debauchery and sins and stuff like that, but a lot of those things were taken out of the book because Oscar Wilde was censored for this book. So that's what you need to know, that most of the more dark parts of this book was taken out because people couldn't handle it. And I mentioned the preface earlier, and that is because I find it very interesting and kind of necessary to read. It is very critical of naturalism, because naturalism was like, you need to just explain what is going on. You can't use any, dramatic thing. Oscar Wilde kind of didn't like this. So his preface starts with the sentences, "The artist is the creator of beautiful things. To reveal art and conceal the artist is the art's aim." And he's kind of dissing people who said that you just need to write dark things, because he says, "Those who find ugly meanings in beautiful things are corrupt without being charming. This is a fault. Those who find beautiful meanings in beautiful things are the cultivated. For these there is hope." So you can kind of see his opinion on the new rise of you know, naturalism in this introduction, and I find it very interesting. There's these last quotes that I've highlighted here that I find interesting and also very relevant to today and our view of fiction. Because Oscar Wilde says, "It is the spectator and not life that art really mirrors. Diversity of opinion about a work of art shows that the work is new, complex and vital. When critics disagree, the artist is in accord with himself. We can forgive a man for making useful things, as long as he does not admire it. The only excuse for making a useless thing is that one admires it intensely. All art is quite useless." I just find it so interesting. It is really fun to read, to be honest. So we're just quickly... I have my notes on my computer, so sorry about that. But we're quickly gonna go through my non-spoiler thoughts on the book, and then we can go into my spoilery discussion of it. So I would say that this book is very society critical. It definitely has some social commentary, and for people who are considered less by the rest of the society, if you feel in a way that you are considered less than other people, I think this book would be very good to read for you, because Oscar Wilde kind of sets that point up to debate. I would say Oscar Wilde has beautiful thoughts, he has beautiful prose. His writing is plainly just beautiful and so reflective. You just need to read it to understand what I'm saying here, because it may be me just being really fascinated by him, but it is truly wonderful. He has a lot of allegories and metaphors in his writing that are very obvious if you know the context. If you do not know, Oscar Wilde was probably gay, and you can see a lot of influences from that in his book in regards to the way the men act around each other and talk about each other, but also in the way that people act towards them. And I'm going to go deeper into this on the spoiler part, but that's just a general thing. It is a very cleverly written book in the way that it captures you and kind of always makes you agree with the main character at the start and then just crushes that at the end. It is a very clever way of writing, I feel like, because then the author makes you think about your own hypocrisy while also pointing out the character's hypocrisy. So I found that very fun. The plot is very engaging if you know about the censoring part, because then you know that there were supposed to be parts here that were left out. But I think it is more of a psychological book, so the drama is really in the psychology of the characters. It is a very short book. It is around, let's see, 200 pages, so if you do not annotate like I did, I think it would be a very quick read for you. And of course it's important to read historical books just because of the relations they have to current times. My Norwegian teacher said that realism books can be very related to today's society and today's books, and I found that that is relevant for The Picture of Dorian Gray as well. Think about that when you consider picking up this book. I'm holding this mug the wrong way. We need representation here on this channel. Those are mainly my thoughts about the non-spoiler part. Definitely recommend this book. It is a wonderful read. It dragged me out of my reading slump, so you know, that's wonderful, and it is incredibly beautiful. So I'll give you like 5 seconds to leave now if you do not want to get spoiled for this book. Of course, The Picture of Dorian Gray is a very general book, like a lot of people already know its plot, but if you don't and if you want to read it yourself, I would definitely recommend just picking up the book and then coming back later to what's the spoiler discussion. The first thing I want to mention is that Wilde is a wonderful writer. He has so many beautiful thoughts that he vocalizes in his writing, and now we're actually gonna read some of them. Can I do that while I hold this mug up? Okay, so I have marked in my list here page 8 to 9, but like everything on page 8 to 9 is annotated. Okay, so I have underlined something here, so that is probably what I meant for me to, you know, say out loud. So here is a quote that says, "I choose my friends for their good looks, my acquaintances for their good character, and my enemies for their good intellect. A man cannot be too careful in the choice of his enemies. I have not got one who is a fool. They are all men of some intellectual power, and consequently they all appreciate me. Is that very vain of me? I think it is rather vain." His characters are very self-aware, and they're very fun to read. I have marked too many beautiful quotes by him, so we're just gonna go to page 19, and we're gonna a lot of his quotes are very long, and that's what makes them beautiful, because they're philosophy around certain subjects, and it's wonderful to read. Page 19, and it's very long, so it's going to be the last one. I know I said 2, but I don't have time to read all of them. So, music had stirred him like that. Music had troubled him for many times. But music was not articulate. It was not a new world, but rather another chaos that it created in us. Words, mere words, how terrible they were, how clear and vivid and cruel. One could not escape from them. And yet what a subtle magic there was in them. They seemed to be able to give a plastic form to formless things, and to have music of their own as sweet as the viol of lute. Mere words, was there anything so real as words? So you can kind of see what kind of writer Wilde is out of that, and I'm going to switch positions again because oh my god. And I have so much to talk about. This book is really okay. And this really proves to you, each line is riddled and loaded with metaphors, information, allegories, and philosophy. And it is just wonderful to read, and it's just inspiring. One small part is Oscar Wilde has a lot of commentary on, the younger people versus the older people, and just in those moments you can really see that humanity is just repeating itself over and over again, because it's just the same old arguments and kind of attitudes towards each other. It is very fun to see just the reflection of yourself really there. And if you want any more proof of how lovely the writing is, all of these tabs are quotes that I found beautiful. They don't mean anything, the colors don't mean anything, but I think you can see from 200 pages this is a lot. Okay, slight point. I'm a little bit into the review now, but there is a character that I call Lord Harry. Call him Harry. His name is actually Henry. So just so you know, and you'll also have the pleasure of me finding out when his name is Henry and watching me react to that. As I mentioned earlier, one of the reasons that The Picture of Dorian Gray was censored and banned was because of the homoeroticism that is in this book. And it is very obvious at some point. And if this is the toned down version, then I really want to read the original version, because, okay, Wilde had some very big dick energy, okay? There's a lot of allegories, metaphors, just commentary in this book that is very obvious to someone who knows the story. So there's much talk about some secrets that Basile, the painter who painted Dorian, has in his soul. And the way Basile talks about Dorian, he says to the other main character, Harry, that he can't understand what Basile feels for Dorian, or the way he looks at Dorian. I find that very telling of what, Wilde is trying to present here. And my mom's breads are done. Oh my god! Yeah, it is, for example, Harry and Basile just describing Dorian. It very much feels like they're attracted to him in some way, and, that brings up a whole lot of problems for itself. But the way, they refer to Dorian, it feels like he's kind of they're awakening to their feelings. You can also see his commentary on what society and society's idea of what is proper, because a lot of natural things get called sinful, and he's kind of criticizing that. The character Dorian also has a lot of like rumors spread about him, and you can also tell that these rumors are kind of a metaphor of people suspecting that Wilde was gay, because a lot of personal influence seems to be woven into this book. It's so cold up here that the tea is really cold right now. There is also a comment on page 14 where Basil says that Harry can't feel what he's feeling. And like, take that how you want, but when I know like Oscar Wilde's story, I feel like this was just him projecting a lot. Like, we have to look at it in a historical context, because, you know, historically men have been a lot more, you know, comfortable with showing affection for one another than they are in today's climate. But we still have to look at Dorian's relationship with Basil and later Harry and see that it suggests a lot of stuff, because, for example, Dorian always blushes whenever Basil or later Harry is near, and the way they talk about each other, it just seems too much to not be a metaphor for something, to be honest. I have a lot of page numbers written down, but I don't know if I should. For example, Dorian says to Harry, "You have curious influence over me. If I ever did a crime, I would come and confess it to you. You would understand me." And Harry answers, "People like you, the willful sunbeams of life, don't commit crimes, Dorian. But I am much obliged to compliment, all the same." And Harry always calls Dorian a good boy. So take from that what you will. Now we're gonna move on to one of the other main ideas of this book, and that is that Dorian's good looks, which triggers him to, you know, curse himself with this painting, are kind of a confirmation of his money. So a lot of people just say, "Oh, you know, he's so pretty, he must be rich, and there's nothing wrong with him because he's pretty and rich." And that is the other main idea that kind of pushes Dorian to go over the threshold when he finds out that his picture takes all of his sense, because then he has no control over what he does. And we're gonna get back to this later and how it relates to Harry and why I think Harry is the main villain of the story. I have kind of this other point written down that is real petty and stupid, but I just say that Sybil is kind of annoying. If you don't know, Sybil is this girl that Dorian meets, and she falls in love with him. What the fuck? Where are my notes? Where are my notes? Like, some of my notes are gone. Where am I? But I feel like that was the point, because when Sybil is annoying, you can kind of see the turnabout point where you just realize that Harry and Dorian and Basil are all pretty heartless men. There are some, because Sybil of course kills herself after Dorian rejects her. Either it's because Wilde didn't like women very much, or it's a point of, you know, Harry's character, but Harry says some very cruel things about Sybil after she's killed herself. I had a pointer. But oh yeah. The thing is, a lot of times with fictional characters, you say like, "Oh, I want them to suffer to know why they're..." Like, annoying characters, you often want them to suffer or get their worldviews just completely shattered because, you know, they're so annoying they must be like stopped. But this book made me realize that I don't wish that on any character, because it doesn't leave you with triumph when they get like broken. It just leaves you feeling empty when that happens. When it happens to Sybil, my heart just broke for her, because she had this idea of Dorian loving her, and then Dorian is just like, "I was in love with you because of your art, and now, like, it's broken, it's gone, you are worth nothing to me anymore." And it is just so tragic and heartbreaking. And before we get to my main points about this book, because you notice I haven't discussed a lot like the picture stuff that is in this book, but that will come. We're going to go into more page-specific things. I have 3 things listed here, and that is, you know, a lot of authors get criticized nowadays for having over-the-top descriptions of their characters, but Wilde kind of takes the cake here by describing a woman as having Vague forget-me-not ice. I've written on page 86, I think that is around Sybil, the concept of sacrificing everything for love, because Sybil is a very good actress, and then one night she does terribly because she wants to run away with Dorian, and Dorian then says, no, you're ruined for me now because you didn't act well. And I think that is a very good commentary on the concept of, you know, people giving up everything for love, and it's a very realistic story in the sense that it belongs to the time period of realism, because you can see a lot of like points being drawn to that. There, that notice. Why is that there? So, my main point. I would say that Dorian isn't a villain in this story. Of course, a lot of people can argue with me on that because Dorian does a lot of cruel things, but I feel like the main problems, the main villains here are Basil and Harry, because they hold Dorian up to this point of perfection. They always tell him that he can do no wrong, and whatever he does wrong is excused. So they kind of push him to be this like kind of perfection, this icon of perfection. They don't see him as a friend, they see him as a perfect token that they can keep. And of course, like, it's the main point, like, if you excuse your own action without looking at him from the outside, you're gonna end up as a douchebag. And Dorian is constantly like, oh, it's not that bad, but even if it is, my picture would take the blame for it, and kind of just... And I had something more developed to say about this point, but it disappeared. So we're gonna go over to the thing I mentioned earlier about my belief that Harry is the main villain. Because I feel like Harry is a very manipulative character. He tries to hold Dorian put where he is. My main point is written down on page 219, and what's fun about this is that Wilde at the start manages to fool you about Harry's character, because at the start Harry is a kind of cool character. He's showing it to the elders and he says a lot of like intellectual things that just show how ignorant the older people of society is. But at the end he comes off as very pretentious and kind of a jerk and very controlling of Dorian, and like he just says like gross stuff to get noticed for it, basically. And Wilde managed to hide this very well in the start of his book. I don't know how he did it, but it did, and it affected it a lot. I written on 226, I written down that Dorian began to think over some of the things that Lord Henry had said to him, and that is the first time that Dorian actually thinks about what Harry says to him. Wait, is his name Henry? His name is Henry! No, his name is Henry. Oh my god, his name is Henry. I hate myself. So I feel like Henry in this story is a kind of a metaphor for naturalism and the way naturalism looked at issues and things. Noah is very critical of that because Henry has a lot of like lines that suggest you know, naturalism ideas. So I think I'm pretty okay in my analysis of that. Oh my god, like I'm so dramatic in my commentary on this because Henry has a lot of like moments where he just tries to conform Dorian to his worldview and how he wants Dorian to be. And I've written Henry is a true villain, the true sinner. Dorian is merely his toy. And I've also written Henry is his drug in reference to Dorian. Can't ever get something positive with him there. So Henry's a really negative influence on Dorian. Whenever Dorian has something positive, Henry comes and tears it down with his cynicism. And then when I got to page 219, I started writing down some notes. And then I got an epiphany. A light in the dark, you could say. My Norwegian teacher's lessons screaming at me from the back of my mind. My instinct to analyze and dive deep in the story ripped through my body, and I realized that the title of the book is Double Meaning, because I've written down, like, in the moment I wrote, Harry is trying to control Dorian, yeah, very obvious, keeping him as his perfect picture. The title, The Picture of Dorian Gray, has a double meaning. It's not about the picture, like the picture itself, the physical picture of Dorian Gray. It's about the picture other people have of Dorian Gray. Like, a lot of people in the reviews say that, oh, it's named The Picture of Dorian Gray, but it's not real about the picture. The picture is never really there. Yes, it is. The main story is about the picture other people have of Dorian Gray. And when I had that epiphany, I was just like, I sat like still, just just letting it sink in for like 30 minutes. It was just a really great realization that Oscar Wilde is really a wonderful writer. One of the funnest things here is that I also compared to this a Norwegian play called A Doll's House by Henrik Ibsen, because the characters of Nora from A Doll's House and Dorian Gray are very similar in the way that they let other people create opinions for them and also allow them to control them. And at the end, both of them take fate into their own hands and say, I can't do this anymore. I thought that was like really nice, and I may take that as a comparison task here later in the year, because I found that extremely funny. But yeah, if you can't tell, the main point of this book is that Dorian lets Henry control him and create his opinions until he actually discovers what happiness is and how to be happy, and then he starts to get more critical of Henry, and then straight afterwards kills himself because Henry's influence was too much. I feel like that is a very great end to the book, actually. It just signifies just what they present, both Dorian, Basil and Henry, and yeah. So that was my review of The Picture of Dorian Gray. I hope this wasn't too, you know, wild, odd, just completely nonsensical. I found the book very enjoyable. It was really good to see like people's reactions to Dorian Gray and all the allegories that were there. And I had a lot of fun annotating this book, because there were a lot of things that I saw and wanted to like highlight, point out. For example, like this page, you can see how much fun I had. I loved reading this book. During the second part, it was kind of just a little bit of spite that I commented so much, because my former boss at the summer job I had is a very pretentious little shit. The moment she found out that I read fantasy, she immediately decided that my taste in books were shit and constantly tried to diss me because I didn't read realistic books. And like, she tried to talk behind my back with my friend about this. Like, seriously. I said that, oh, like, we read like Ibsen and stuff at school because it's really, you know, it's interesting. And she said, oh, you know, it's probably just too realistic for you who reads fantasy. And then she managed to say Amalia Skram's name wrong while talking about how she was a really, you know, feminist writer. And it's, yeah, I know, she's part of my curriculum. We have read stories by her, and they're not about feminism, they're about society and its problems. Maybe take a listen before you try to educate me on my own education. If you enjoyed what I had to say, please leave a like. If you want to hear more of what I have to say and maybe enjoyed a lot of my opinions, you could subscribe. Leave a comment if there's anything you want to discuss with me, and I'll see you in my next video. I hope you have a lovely day. Bye.